Hello and welcome to Assemblies of the World with me, Anna Isabel. And I have John Gilbert with me today to talk about maybe it's a thorny issue, the issue of law. Hello, John.
Hello, Anna, and you've really put me in it this time.
Have I?
Yes, I've got to get this right, otherwise, the people I'm out with on Sunday won't believe a word I say.
Right. Well, with so much at risk, let's let's get started. The reason that I wanted to talk to you about this is because we're hearing a lot of terms, and it would be nice to get a beginner's guide to understanding what they mean. And so I thought it would be good to get a sense of what common law is versus something like maritime law, um, and then contract law, because we hear all of these terms and we're trying to make sense of them. And and then there's canon law that we hear about as well. So, first of all, we hear most about common law. What exactly is common law? And when we are going through the court system, is that what's being used?
Okay, common law is law literally which is common to all. So the basis of law that we hear that we see in the courts is based on law which is common to all. So that's common law. What people are actually seeing is a form of what is called common law, which is far from common to all. It's being spouted as law, which is you've got to say this, you've got to say that. When a letter comes to you, you've got to do this, you've got to do that. Really and truthfully, the law which is common to all would be natural law. And natural law, or God's law, whatever you want to call it, is the law that we have to live our lives by. Common law is really a basis for what you might call judicial law. That's the laws that we have to face when we go to court. However, those aren't the problematic law. The laws that we have to face, most of us have to face when we go to court, are not laws at all. They are based on acts of parliament. They're based on people's abilities to confuse. They are based on people who want to keep you down, keep you under their thumb. And therefore, they mostly invent things as they go along. Acts of parliament, one thing people have got to realise is that an act of parliament is law if you say, okay, I'm going to obey that. If you want to obey these acts, then it is law. You can't dip in, dip out whenever you want to. Here go the hands again. Here we go. You must choose what you're going to do. Do you want to obey these acts of parliament, or do you want to stick by natural law, or are you going to come up with some law of your own? In which case, maybe you're going to have to change the way we live our lives. So, law is a difficult subject, and it is deliberately made more difficult. Now, we talk about maritime law. As far as I know, there's only one that I know of. There's only one court in the country which is under maritime law. I've no idea why people are coming up across all these different things that say this is law. When we go out on patrol, when we're out on the streets, when we're talking to the police, when we're talking to the public, we use another type of law, which is often known as common sense. That's what law is all about. Law is all about common sense. Does it make sense to you? You can have a law which we have to abide. Now, law is there's a difference really between law. There's a difference between common law. There is a difference between law, which is natural law. We're talking about there's so many different subjects that you can have, but it's all been spun. Okay, law is not against us. Law can be for us. That is law. But a law is something that you are born with. It's your birthright. You have the right to exist. You have the right to live your life in peace and harmony. You have the right to be the person you want to be. You do not have the right to harm others. You don't have the right to commit fraud. You don't have the right to cause people loss. You do have the absolute right to keep the peace. We are all charged with that. That is absolute. That is law. When we talk about anything else, we're talking about natural laws, we're talking about God's laws, we're talking about man-made laws. And when we talk about man-made laws, this is when we start getting acts of parliament, legislation, all this sort of thing coming in. And that's when people start to get confused, because they're man-made. They're made because people want to make you act in a certain way. They're specifically there to keep you, if you like, a good citizen.
So if we come back to common law, because my understanding is that common law is something that is built over time, and it's they talk about there being it's based on precedent, and so this is something that is more, I feel more akin to natural law than what often comes through legislation. Would that be a fair distinction?
I think what you're describing there is equity. Equity is built over time. Equity takes precedence. Equity has as precedent over any other type of law. If there is a conflict, you always come back to equity. And equity is, I think equity came in about 15, no, somewhere around about the 16th century. And it was brought in to stop judges at the time from applying laws which they felt were reasonable, their form of reasonable at the time. So each trial, even though it could be the same crime, could come out with a different ending. So judges applied what they felt was right at that particular time, and that was leading to a lot of discrepancies. So equity was brought in as a way of regulating that, and meaning that we looked into the past to see what happened before. And in seeing what happened before, we could say, okay, this was the decision. In this particular instance, it is close enough to what we're looking for to make this a basis for how we're going to make this decision. That's equity. Now, equity has a lot of well, going back up there, we talked about sort of natural law, and we've talked about divine law, we've talked about man-made laws. Now, man-made laws can be good to us. If we talk about contracts, for instance, contracts is a big part of man-made laws, and it's something which we mustn't shy away from. If you want to enter into a contract with somebody, if you've got a property and you want to rent that property out, you want man-made laws in there because you want a contract, and this is where contract law comes in. So when you make a contract with somebody, you must buy that contract, even if you want to turn around and say, well, I want to leave this contract. You build that into the contract, so you can always stay within that contract. And you cannot you have to have a meeting of minds. Not necessarily means, it doesn't mean that you have to have a written piece of paper with everything written down onto it, because I can make a contract with you now, and we are in contract now because I have said to you that I will come along and do this interview. We made a contract when we said that we would do this together. And therefore, if I didn't turn up, I would be in breach of that contract. You can make contracts in every single day of your life. You will make contracts with people by saying, I will do this, I will do that. It's still binding.
It's an agreement,
It's an,
you know, agreement, and it's an agreement that is kind of binding between the two people. And so for that reason, it must be man-made because it's the two of you reaching an agreement about how things are going, how the affair is going to be conducted. So the other term that is being used quite a lot is the term of jurisdiction, implying that there is more than one jurisdiction that we might be falling under, um, either when we're going to court or or when we're dealing or not dealing with government. So can you explain a little bit about that?
okay. Jurisdiction is, we are under one jurisdiction, which is we're under natural law, God's law. And anything which goes against that law, anything that tries to do us harm, anything that tries to lead us away from that is not law, because a law is not law if you apply your mind to it and your mind says, I wouldn't have come to that conclusion. If you can't come to the same conclusion that the law says that you should do, then it's not a law. It's gone. All you have to do is actually turn up in law and argue your case. And supposedly, anyway, most of the time, I would say that you can, if you argue your case well, then you can win your case. What we are up against at the moment is when we're talking about jurisdiction, we're talking about people making up their own stuff. And that shouldn't worry us at all, because if people say, oh, you're coming under the jurisdiction of this Act of Parliament or that Act of Parliament or this area, or you're coming under maritime law, or you're coming under God's law, or whatever it is, it shouldn't actually worry us, because it should have the same approach. Every law, everything that we do can be simplified down to a point where logic can take over. We don't need to learn books and books of law. Having said that, of course, if you've ever done the Peacekeeper course, it's a long course. And if you're a community peacekeeper, you've probably got 3 times that amount to digest anyway. So it takes a long time to train a peacekeeper, and they have to be diligent in doing it. And these people have to be brave as well, because they have to go out in uniform. If they don't go out in uniform, people can't recognize who they are. You can hardly go out on patrol and help fix people's problems and tackle agents knocking on the door demanding money and goodness knows what. You can't tackle these things unless people can recognize that you have knowledge. They also have the authority of the courts. That's the people's courts, and they're appointed by the courts. So if you look at the authority that they have compared with the authority made for the police, who are employees of let's say a corporation, as their employees, they only have authority by the people that they're working for. But when you come to community peacekeepers and community peace constables, they have the authority of the people behind them, which is the highest authority there is. The people have the highest authority in the land. We shouldn't be afraid of other people. We shouldn't be afraid of laws. We can just turn around and say, no, can't do that. Where do you think your authority comes from? And if they start quoting you, then sorry, Um, I actually did I actually sign up to that? I forgot. There's a piece of paper that says somewhere that I actually signed up to this. No, I probably didn't. But you can get caught on that one, because if you say to a constable, oh, no, actually, forget that. There's no such things as constables anymore. Police constables are not. They're all police officers now. If they say, oh, this is my authority comes from here, they then have to prove. You don't have to prove anything. They have to prove that you come under their authority. If they believe that you do, they have to prove their claims against you.
Okay, so I'm listening to you very carefully, trying to make sense of what could be, what is actually very confusing, for those of us who are new to this and to this terminology. But if I'm understanding you correctly, then technically, those who purport to be able to legislate cannot do so without our consent, or put it a different way, if they do it without consent of the people, then it means that we are not obliged to acknowledge their supposed authority over us. Is that correct?
Yes, but do you know how you actually give them their authority? And this is
No,
what
that's my next question, because it seems to me that we are taught that this is the way it is, that we live, well, more and more of us are questioning this, of course, that we live in a democracy. And the way that the system works is that we have representatives in parliament who will vote on our behalf on whether laws are passed or not. Then there's a second chamber, a higher chamber, which, although supposedly doesn't really have as much power as the first chamber, has the power to scrutinize and change the laws that are presented by Parliament, the second chamber, of course, being the Lords, and that the sovereign doesn't really get involved in it at all. And then it goes back to Parliament with the changes made by the Lords, and Parliament votes on whether or not it wants to keep the changes. So this is how it is. And whatever they say goes, whether we like it or not. And we just have to wait till the next election. And then if we're not happy with what they did, we vote in somebody who perhaps might be more amenable to our way of thinking. So this is how we are taught. And we're not actually taught that we don't have to take part in that system, and that they don't really have the right of authority over us. So of course we don't know how we've assented to this authority. How have we assented to this authority? As far as I and many others are concerned, we were just born into it, weren't we?
No, you registered to vote. That's how you gave your assent. You registered to vote. As soon as you register to vote, and they tell you you have to register to vote, and this is one of the problems that we have with the system is, if you look at when the piece of paper that comes through and says you must register to vote, it says if you don't, there is a fine involved. That's coercion. People think they're going to get fined if they don't register to vote. As soon as you register to vote, that allows your representative to do what they like, because you've given them your authority to act on your behalf. That's how critical registering to vote is. Now, I don't register to vote. I don't vote. I won't have anything to do with this system, because to me, it is something which I can't conform to, simply because it allows too much corruption in. So I don't vote, and I don't register to vote. And I know a lot of other people, actually, I know a lot of people in the community assemblies themselves who don't register to vote for the very same reason. So registering to vote is where you give your permission for a representative to go and do whatever they like on your behalf. You don't, the system, you're giving your assent to the system of Parliament. So it's the system that you're giving the assent to.
So let me get this straight. We have no choice. We're coerced into registering to vote. We might not vote, but when as we become part of this electoral roll, there immediately is a presumption that we have accepted or assented to being governed by Parliament and all the institutions that go with it.
That's correct. The whole thing, the whole gamut are you must, if you're going to actually withdraw, which more and more people are doing now, if you're going to actually withdraw from the system itself, then you have to stop registering to vote. It's where everything starts from. You've always got to drill down to the lowest common denominator, and that's the one.
So in order to quit the system, we have to come off the electoral roll.
You have to stop voting. You have to stop giving your assent.
Okay, stopping voting is different because there are plenty of people who are on the electoral roll and don't vote. And I know people who are deliberately now spoiling the ballot in protest. But that does not stop you being in the system. You are still giving assent to be governed by the system.
Yes.
Okay. So I guess the the next question immediately that comes to mind is this the only way out of the system, or are there other ways by which we have become locked into the system and that we need to untangle ourselves from? So this is one. Is it the only one, or are there others?
It's the only one to start with, to say, no, I'm sorry, I didn't give assent to this. You can say, look, I'm sorry, but, where's the contract that says I have to obey this rule? Because I don't have to obey the rule. Yes, you did. Right at the very beginning of all of this was your not reading the contract which you signed, which says, I consent to the parliamentary system. So you need to withdraw from that. But do you need to withdraw from it? Can you actually just say, no, I don't want anything to do with this? Can you just stop? And in stopping doing that, of course, you stop from voting. And then, in theory, then you have the right to turn around and say, look, I didn't have anything to do with this. I haven't contracted to do this. I haven't voted in this system. I don't want anything to do with this system. And there is, if you like, a precedent for this as well, because there are groups of people living in this world who live without the control of government. And there are certain Jewish communities, for instance. We see communities in America that have withdrawn from the system completely. They don't have anything to do with it. And they're allowed to live perfectly natural lives. Nobody tries to interfere with them. And that's that dog again. Come to listen as well.
He is very interested in law.
He's got his peacekeeper's outfit on.
I could just see little Barry.
There are perfectly good systems out there for living outside of the parliamentary system or the system of governance most people are used to. So we don't have to do it. Nobody has to actually do it, but we have to learn how. So if you want to turn around and say, look, I haven't contracted to this, then you really need to go right back to the very beginning and say, where did the contract occur? I'm not having anything to do with that contract. I can't see that you have to actually withdraw from the system, because in not returning a voting, the slip that says, yes, I want to be put on the electoral roll, aren't you saying, no, I don't want anything to do with this system? Because if you don't want anything to do with the system, if you don't want to vote, you've already said you don't. If you do, then could you actually return that that invite, if you like, to go on the electoral roll? Could you return it and say, no, sorry, I don't want anything to do with this, thank you very much, but I'm returning this slip. However, I don't want to contract with you. I don't want anything to do with it. It's possible you could do that, but there are certain things that I've noticed since I've not been returning that piece of paper that don't seem to happen anymore. So I do have an easier life.
Okay, so let me understand this. The way in which we come out of the electoral roll is to not return the paper that they send to say, make sure that you've registered to vote.
Yeah, if you look at any system, then let's say council tax. You renew your contract every year with council tax by paying your council tax, by not saying, I don't want to have anything to do with this. You renew your contract each year. And at that point, you don't come under their system. I can't see why, when we talk about equity, I can't see why that same solution doesn't apply to what I'm not signing up to this piece of paper. Go away. Every piece of paper that comes through my door saying, I need to replace my windows now, or I need a new boiler, or goodness knows what else, it goes straight in my filing cabinet. It's called bin 13.
Okay, all right. So elections are coming up this year.
Mm-hmm.
There are going to be inevitably reminders for people to register to vote.
Mm-hmm.
So this would be, if I'm understanding you correctly, the opportunity to get out of the system by either ignoring the polling cards or not the polling cards, the paperwork that comes through, or by returning it and making a statement to say that you're not doing it. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
What you need to do is read the paperwork, because it can always change. You need to read the paperwork when it comes through. If it says anywhere on there that you will be added to the register, if you don't return this, then you would have to do something to say, I don't want any part of this. However, if it doesn't say that, then you should be able to just withdraw from the system purely and simply by not returning it. End of story. That's it.
Okay. Well, that's certainly a very interesting way of looking at this, and this is possibly the most straightforward one, would you say, of extricating ourselves from the system, or showing intention of not being governed by the system?
Extricating ourselves from the parliamentary system. We don't want to extricate ourselves from the rule of law, because we are protected by the rule of law. Rule of law is our birthright. We don't want to withdraw ourselves from our birthright, but we do want to get out from underneath this parliamentary mess that we see ourselves in right now. And that is, having drilled down all the way to that, and don't forget, we've got some really good, we work quite closely with Mark Horn, who's the Peacekeepers from Peacekeepers. We've got David Broker, who's common law. These people know their stuff. They know it far better than I do. I only know it as far as what we can do when we go out onto the streets and we have to uphold the law, which is natural law, God's law. I won't say common law because that sort of gets distorted by people if you're not careful. You have to be very careful what you actually quote on that one. But when it comes to natural law, equity, equity is very, very simple, really, because there can't be a breach of the peace. There can be no wrongdoing without a solution. So whenever you see a wrongdoing, there must be a solution to it. So you must apply a solution. And that's where you actually come into bringing about, bringing people together so that if there is a dispute, you bring people together. And if there has been a wrongdoing, if you feel that there's a wrongdoing, if you then have to bring about a solution to that wrongdoing. And you don't need a court to do that. You can do that out on the streets.
And how would that work?
Well, if you've done it yourself many a time, or people have done it many a time. You weren't paying attention. You went in the back of somebody when you're driving your car, and you say, "Oh, I'm so sorry, but I just lost attention there for a few minutes." Here's my insurance claim. Is everybody all right in the car? Everybody's all right in the car. Fine. You're doing it. You do it naturally. That's equity. That's you solving your own problems out there. Some problems can be a bit more complex than that, and that's where we start training our peacekeepers and peace constables. They have to know as much as they possibly can, because they have to go out and sort these problems out. It's actually better if we've got people who are have the age and experience behind them, rather than people who are young and they want to go out and fight and defend themselves. And goodness, don't need to do that. What you need is logic. You need a heart, especially. I mean, logic is only good so far. You have to feel the justice, and that's where it actually the whole thing starts to come together. When you feel that something is right, and you know in your heart that something is right, you've got a solution.
Good. Well, this, I hope, is clarifying a few confusing points for those who are watching. And you are very involved with the peacekeepers and in training the peacekeepers. So you are definitely the person to see if anyone out there wants to join the peacekeepers and learn more about this beautiful service that is being provided. John, how do people get in touch, and how do they contribute? What would you suggest they do?
We run this through the community assemblies. So we have our own health service, we have our own lawful service. We help people as much as we can. We've got experts in their fields, which we can employ. But if somebody wants to become a peacekeeper, they've got to look at this from a slightly different angle, because learning to be a peacekeeper is one thing. Actually going out on the streets, being recognized by people, which means wearing a uniform, talking to the police, because we don't need to confront the police with anything. They've got their beliefs, we've got ours. We should be able to come together and say, right, okay, is there a common ground here that we can use? It takes a certain type of a person to gain the knowledge, to go out on the streets, to face people, to go out in uniform, so that they could think of themselves as a target. Well, they are. People will see who they are. We went to an assembly not so long ago, where we went into a meeting, and as we literally walked in through the doors, there were people coming to us and asking us what we were about and so on. And it was great because you know, 2 hours later, 3 hours later, I don't know how long it was now, to be honest with you, I virtually lost my voice. And this is what we get all the time when we're out, and this is what it's all about. This is putting natural law against man-made laws and saying there is a way to actually sort this out. So people have got to say, get in their minds when they want to learn to do all this, it's not just for themselves, they're doing this for other people. So there's certain things that they're going to need to do. And there is a certain training regime. We've got other people that help in this regime. We've got a lot of people who put their heads together. Don't waste their time. If you're going to go out there, go out and do it. And we don't go out in force, but we do go out maybe 4s and 5s and things like this. A minimum, it should be a minimum of 3. I've been out on my own before now. It doesn't help because you haven't got witnesses there. So really, there should be 3 people at all times. So you've got help and support there. You learn from each other. If I can't remember, one particular precedent, somebody else will. So you're supporting each other all the time. And if somebody gets aggressive against you, against me, then one of the others can step forward and quieten things down. That's how you actually go out there. You go out there with the intent of quietening everything down. So if they want to do that, you've unfortunately got to be a member of the community assemblies to do it, which means that you have to enlist within the community assemblies themselves, and then you can do the peacekeeper course, and then we can support you on all the other stuff as well. But you have to think about it logically. If you do it on your own and don't tell anybody, who are we going to call? We're going to call somebody else.
Good. So that I would be putting a link to the Community Assembly's website in the description box, along with other good information, including how people might be able to donate, because all of this, this is where we do actually need some funding. So if you would like to contribute, that it would be very appreciated.
It costs us a few £100s to get a uniform together, and it's all done from donations. So yes, some people are actually buying their own uniforms, and that's fine. But as far as the police is concerned, you do have a warrant. You do carry a warrant card. So if people actually know, we do know of people that are out there calling themselves peacekeepers and have managed to get hold of bits and pieces of the uniform itself and calling themselves community peacekeepers. They're not. They have to have a warrant. So again, because you're appointed by the people, that is your identification. It is difficult. We have so many people, but at the same time as having a warrant, there is a number on that warrant. That number on the warrant corresponds with your registration in the community assemblies. Are you still registered in the community assemblies? Is that name against your number? Yes, it is. That's fine. That's how the police can identify who we are, in the same way that we can identify them because they have a warrant number as well. So it's allowing everybody to just double check that there's not someone out there that's pretending to be something they're not. When we talked about equity just now, very, very quickly, the rules of equity are actually quite interesting. Have I got time to do that?
Yes.
Yeah, all right, okay. The first thing is equity acts in person. It doesn't act about property. It acts in person. So it's nothing to do with objects. It's about people. Equity will not suffer a wrong, I said before, without a remedy. You must have a remedy in place if somebody has suffered a wrong. Equity regards as done what ought to be done. No good being Cornish about this. You can't say, I'll do it directly. You're supposed to have done it already. You assume that as soon as you know there is a wrong, you're going to actually put something right, and you're going to do it right now. Okay. Equity imputes an intent to fulfill an obligation. So equity comes into contract law as well. So again, when I said to you, yeah, I'll come and do this, and we'll sit down together and I'll bore the pants off you, okay. Um, the fact is that I have said I will come and do this, so I must come and do it. I mustn't let you down. So that comes into equity as well. Equity does not demand that those seeking shall have led a blameless life. Think about that one for a moment. You're counted as what you have done in this particular instance. Nothing from before comes into it. Now, this actually comes into court cases as well. When you think about it, when you go before a jury, they're not allowed to bring into the fact that you've broken into houses umpteen times in your life, and this is another house that's been broken into. You can't assume that that person has broken into that house at this time. You can't bring in something prior. So that might come into the investigation, but it certainly doesn't come into the court case. And that, again, is equity. All these things are actually coming from equity. Equity does not, getting this one right, equity does not demand that seeking shall have led blameless lives. Equity aids the vigilance and not the indolence. So if you are lazy, basically, and you think you have a right to be looked after and you have a right to do things, equity is not for you. Equity is for those people that go out and try to do other things. All of this sort of comes in. Equity is a great subject to talk about, and it's the one subject I've never heard people talking about.
You're right. And I think this is really, when we're talking about equity, and everything that you've read out there is about fairness.
Yeah.
And that comes back to natural law again. So because natural law is fair. And so you can see how natural law, or the principles of natural law, have been quietly influencing or embedding themselves into the way in which we understand justice should be carried out, if I can word it like that it should be carried out, so that this is, justice is about fairness, and there's the word equity there that you're using, and that all comes back to natural law, which is why it becomes so important when we're juxtaposing it against the acts of parliament, which would fail to meet those criteria.
Yeah, you're talking that equity again. There is a part, if I remember, 1596. Remember, I couldn't remember the date. I think it was 1596 that equity was brought in. Equity won't allow a statute to be used as a cloak for fraud. There's a good one for you.
That is a big, isn't it?
Something else that we've talked about there, where you know, which is fraudulent. They're acting fraudulently in demanding money from you. Equity comes into its own there as well. There's so many parts that from equity, and yet it is probably only a page that you have to learn. And you can protect yourself very, very well indeed. And again, it's something that we use quite often when we're out there on the streets talking to people. And we have to act. You've heard the expression probably, when you hold your hand up in court, you have to act with clean hands. Nothing hidden. This is, you're talking to people without hiding facts from them. If you are hiding facts from them, then you're committing fraud. And even the courts can do that. And there are a lot of courts out there. People must not confuse courts with tribunals. There are a lot of tribunals out there which are not courts, but call themselves courts. Some of them even call themselves magistrates' courts. They're not. Because if you check up on the number that you're given, the magistrates' court will turn around and say, no, we don't have any such number here. There's no such case here. And this is where people can get caught out. This is what the peacekeepers are there for, to check out on these things, because the the one thing that we have to say is the police do not know this side of it. They are just told to go and say, right, there's somebody wants support there, there's an agent wants support to collect money from this people, we think there's going to be a fray, there's going to be somebody's going to breach the peace, go out and make sure the peace isn't breached. Hold on a minute. You're coming out to stop a breach of the peace. That goes for both sides. So the person who is breaching the peace could be the agent that they've come out to protect. Now, what are they supposed to do then? They don't see the overall picture. So that's all we're saying is our people are trained to do that. Why not make use of them? And we can come down and tell you how to do it.
Excellent. Wonderful. John, thank you so much for beginning to shed some light on what is obviously a rather complex subject. Thank you.
I probably confused people even more now.
Well, if that's the case, we'll just have to do round two.
We'll have to do round two, yeah.
Thank you very much for your time today.
All right, Anna.
And thank you all for watching. Until next time, goodbye.